First, I would like to thank Dominique Charpin and Antoine Jacquet for organizing this conference and for the kind invitation. My talk deals with some peculiar cuneiform tablets and fragments in the British Museum's Kuyunjik collection. These tablets are substantially earlier than what is commonly referred to as the Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, and probably originate in Babylonia. In the first half of my talk, I offer an overview of this material, and in the second, I pick out some pieces that may prove interesting for this audience. Don't worry, I will keep it short. Needless to say, what I'm presenting now is work in progress. The topics seem to me especially appropriate for this conference because, in a certain way, it covers the 140 years of study of old Babylonian archives, or 150 as we learned from Dominique yesterday. Introducing the Electronic Babylonian Literature project here is hardly necessary, but I must mention it briefly to explain how I came to this topic. The project was launched in April 2018 by Enrique Jimenez at the LMU Munich with funding from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Besides the up-to-date electronic editions of Akkadian literary compositions, which form the core of the project, a pool of fragments was established in which the users, and later the artificial intelligence, were meant to catch the new manuscripts. For practical reasons, the first corpus we started working on was the British Museum's Kuyunjik collection, comprising some 30,000 tablets and fragments, most of them from Neo-Assyria and Nineveh. Although generations of scholars have been surveying and cataloging the Kuyunjik material, I think we have made very good progress. We identified more than 1,000 new joins, found long-lost pieces and several new manuscripts of literary compositions, even of very well-researched ones, such as Enuma Elish or the Epic of Gilgamesh. And more joins show that there is still work to do. This is a tiny but important join to the exorcistic series Hulba Zizi. I made it 2 days ago while sitting on the train from Munich to Paris, and you are actually the first to see it. During this work, we occasionally came across fragments whose presence at the Kuyunjik collection was striking. Fragments of old Babylonian paleography and contents. The existence of such tablets has been repeatedly remarked. The early catalogs described them as archaic. Some tablets even got published. Preliminary lists were compiled, but no one thoroughly examined them as a group, so Enrique asked me to do so. This task was made much easier by the publication of Christopher Walker's catalogue of the British Museum's Babylon collection, in which he gave a list of all such tablets he was aware of. Today, I know of 33 Kuyunjik texts that are all Babylonian or even earlier. Before presenting the different groups, I must briefly address the question of how the mere existence of such tablets could be explained. Were they found in the early 2nd millennium layers of Nineveh? Or were there all Babylonian tablets in Ashurbanipal's collection, either imported from Babylonia or inherited as such from earlier kings' libraries? Or were these tablets apparently found elsewhere and registered as part of the Kuyunjik collection by mistake? Before discarding possibilities number 1 and 2, let us examine whether they are indeed unrealistic. A handful of fragments with old Babylonian script were discovered by Reginald Campbell Thompson in the Temple of Ishtar in Nineveh and published later, much later, by Stephanie Daly. But it seems that the old Babylonian layers of Nineveh were not reached before the early 1930s, excluding this possibility for most of the set pieces. Some of the old Babylonian Kuyunjik tablets might be, at least theoretically, late and archaizing copies of old Babylonian texts. It could especially apply for royal inscriptions. We do have a few copies of early Assyrian and Babylonian rulers' inscriptions from the Nineveh libraries. A bilingual inscription of Burnaburiash II is known exclusively from Nineveh tablets. In the case of some inscriptions of Nebuchadnezzar I, there is even an Ashurbanipal colophon confirming that we are actually dealing with Nineveh copies of the original inscriptions. Tablets of Middle Assyrian date, originally written in Ashur, also occur in Nineveh. One may speculate that these could have belonged to earlier libraries. But the historical scope does not go beyond the Middle Babylon and Middle Assyrian periods. None of the Old Babylonian royal inscriptions has an Ashurbanipal colophon, and none is known from Neo-Assyrian copies either, except for what we call the Laws of Hammurabi, which was first known from Nineveh copies, published by Bruno Meissner at the end of the 19th centuries, and it was only later that the discovery of the stele in Susa was made. There remains the third solution, that these tablets entered the Kuyunjik collection by mistake, and they were actually discovered elsewhere. Considering this possibility for texts that are either later than the Neo-Assyrian period, or significantly earlier, or written in non-Assyrian script, we almost immediately find other text groups that already arouse suspicion. For a handful of Neo-Elamite texts in the Kuyunjik collection, it has been assumed that Loftus found them in Malamir. Today, it is considered more likely that they were indeed written in Nineveh. The situation is much clearer for royal inscriptions of Neo-Babylonian kings and for late Babylonian archival documents, because these could only be written after the fall of Nineveh in 612 BC. Especially the Daily Telegraph, the Smiths, the Rassam, and the Rassam II collections contain a good many late Babylonian tablets. These must obviously come from Babylonia, where Rassam, among others, was also active. For instance, the tablets in the first Rassam collection were purchased by Rassam in December 1877 in Baghdad. Therefore, the question is if we can find enough internal or museographic evidence on the Old Babylonian Kuyunjik tablets to prove that they come from Babylonian sites. In some publications of such pieces, the same question has already been addressed. An inscription of Sin-Kashid and a promulgation document with the year name of Rim Anum could hardly come from elsewhere than Uruk. So Christopher Walker assumed that they were found there by Loftus. Some tablets of mathematical contents have been associated with Senkere, the modern name of Larsa, another place where Loftus was active and from where the Kuyunjik collection has cylinders of Neo-Babylonian kings. A literary text, a manuscript of the royal hymn Ishbi Era-i, is accompanied by an old piece of paper with the remark, outside wall of a tomb, Sinkara. Although some may find it striking to find the hymn to Ishbi Era in Larsa, we should accept this as a work hypothesis until further evidence emerges. Further museographic evidence is provided by some B numbers. The tablets in the B collection were first published by Strassmayer, who thought they came from Uruk. This was soon corrected to Kutala. Dominique Charpin, thanks to the Ur tablets excavated by Woolley, could demonstrate that the B collection is actually a mixture of the Kutala and Ur tablets found by Loftus and Taylor, respectively. How does this help us? One of the Old Babylonian Kuyunjik tablets does have a B number. This is why Dominic examined it, and on prosopographical grounds, he could identify it as a Kutala document. A Kuyunjik manuscript of the instructions of Shuruppak was joined to a fragment with a B number by Christopher Walker, revealing that it must come from Kutala or Ur. The different genres offer different possibilities, and the literary manuscript usually does not provide any further clues. So let us not decide between Kutala and Ur yet. To sum up, there is enough evidence to say that the tablets from the simultaneous excavations of different sites in the 19th century occasionally got confused, either before their shipment already or later at the museum. As a consequence, artifacts were sometimes mistakenly registered in the British Museum's Kuyunjik, Babylon, or Sippar collections. This is especially true for the Kuyunjik collection, which has become associated with tiny fragments. In the words of Christopher Walker, the Kuyunjik collection seems to have become a dumping ground for tablets, which the museum staff were unable to allocate to another registered collection. This phenomenon is best demonstrated by physical joins between tablets in the aforementioned 3 collections. I show you only 3 examples, one for each combination. The first is a Kuyunjik piece of Enuma Anu Enlil between 2 Babylon collection pieces. The second, the Sipar collection fragment of a Namburbi ritual, bridging the gap between Kuyunjik fragments. And the third, a Sipar collection piece joining a Babylon collection, manuscript of Councils of Wisdom. As I attempted to group the 33 early Babylon texts from Kuyunjik, I realized that one of them might be even earlier. This fragment was first considered a copy of an early votive inscription, but based on its form and paleographical features, I suggested that it was actually a fragment of an Ur-3 administrative document from Girsu. The circumstances and the assumed date of acquisition do fit the discovery of the vast Girsu archives in 1894. Since then, I identified one piece that may be even earlier. But this is uninscribed. This is a seal impression without cuneiform text, reminiscent of a late Uruk jar sealing found in archaic Nineveh, but probably originating from the south. Turning now to the Old Babylonian tablets, we find the aforementioned 2 mathematical texts, 7 lexical pieces, some of them possibly belonging to the same tablet. I will discuss these in more detail on a different occasion. Among the 6 Sumerian literary texts, I already mentioned the instructions of Shuruppak, published by Bent Alstar and Ishbi Era E, that will be included in Piotr Michalovsky's edition of that composition. A large tablet containing the Song of the Hoe and the Farmer's instructions was published by Miguel Civil. Gabor Zolyomi and I edited a new manuscript of a letter prayer Sin Shamuch to Enki in last year's Iraq. I'm still working on the remaining 2, one of which seems to be in MSL, written in a very minute script and terribly preserved. Although there is no direct evidence concerning their provenience, I think none of you will be surprised if I assume that these literary manuscripts may come from Ur rather than Kutalla. And here I can refer back to Marine Béranger's talk yesterday. A lentil-shaped school tablet on the right contains probably a list of divine or personal names and no literary excerpt. Out of the 3 royal inscriptions, I did mention the one of Sinkashit, published by Walker. A fragment of an inscription of Waratsim belongs to the Smith collection and the Samsuil Nakon to the King collection, but I don't have a photo of the latter. The Waratsim piece must come from Ur, where Woolley discovered its 2 noun parallels. It's not only the very beginning of the text that we have, but also the end, so the parallel is absolutely certain, but the end of the text is very difficult to photograph. So Woolley discovered its 2 noun parallels, and also the text is about building Ur's city walls. There is no reason either to assume that the Samsuil Nakon was found in Kuyunjik. King himself described it as not from Kuyunjik. Now we come to the archival documents. There is only one certain letter, possibly a school letter, but I refrain from further discussion since it belongs to a group that Dominic aims to study. The small fragment on the right may eventually belong to a letter, but this can only be confirmed if we find the tablet it joins to. Among the Kutalla fragments, you already know the piece published by Dominic in his Tel Sifr book. Another interesting piece, a very small one, was described by W.G. Lambert in his 3rd supplement to the Kuyunjik catalogues as Babylonian omens with question mark. By Babylonian, he meant late Babylonian, and his assumption of omens was probably based on the seemingly repetitive nature of this text. Janet Finke, who thoroughly studied the Nineveh Library's Babylonian material, put this fragment in the various divination group. Lambert's unpublished folios, digitized, catalogued, and made available to the public by Andrew George, contains even a preliminary transliteration of this piece, and an obviously later note, also in Lambert's handwriting, piece of envelope. This remark was obviously based on an impression of cuneiform signs on the fragment's interior. A close examination led to the assumption that a group of Gutala documents might be involved, in which two individuals called Ili Ikisham frequently occur as witnesses, often side by side. The impression on the interior helped little because it contained the same names of witnesses, but at least it confirmed the assumed position on the tablet. The envelope was very fragmentary. So it confirmed the assumed position on the tablet. As all of you know, when a piece of an envelope finds its right position on the tablet, it usually fits there like a join and cannot be moved to left and right. You can imagine my satisfaction when I received the envelope of the tablet, and it turned out that Janet Politi had already joined together some previously unnumbered pieces, to which my fragment perfectly joined. This shows that although the Tel Sirf tablets have been studied for 150 years, there is still progress, and we must keep updating our text editions. I turn now to the tablets from Ur, but remain at Janet Politi, because she joined another Kuyunjik fragment to an Ur document, which must therefore originate in Taylor's excavations. Now I allow myself to discuss another Ur piece in a little bit more detail. The tablet on the left is a fragmentary inheritance division contract in which three brothers divide their father's estates. Nanna Mamba is getting slightly more than his brothers Imkuruya and Sin Magir, hence he must be the firstborn son. Of course, everyone will realize after Wibke Meinholz's talk that the portions of the house the brothers receive are really small. We do know these people from another inheritance division contract, UET 510 on the right. This was edited by Kilian Butz, and the two documents contribute mutually to each other's restoration. The brothers also agree to divide their father's prebends equally, and at the same time, they assign a bit of both house and orchard to a certain Ahasunu, who is called his wife. I wonder if the widow is meant, but the text does not describe her as the mother of the three. Nevertheless, the relationship between the two texts is complicated, to say the least. In our text, Nanna Mamba and his brothers divide one house and an orchard with date palms. In the UET 5.1, only one orchard seems to be meant. Only Ahasunu and possibly Nanna Mamba receive parts of a house. The third brother does not appear at all, only in the description of a burgul seal. That text also stipulates that Sim Magir's creditors have no claim over his brothers. The UET 5 text is dated to the 10th year of Rimsin I. The other tablet is badly disintegrated where the date should be, but the same year name seems nevertheless possible. The few witnesses preserved on the Kuyunjik collection piece also appear in the UET 5 text. So what happened? I assume that Sim Magir died, or for another reason, some piece of property had to be redivided. But the UET 5 text definitely needs collation, and I don't dare say more before I've done so. As for the remaining Old Babylonian documents in the Kuyunjik collection, I already showed you the year name promulgation documents of Rimanum of Uruk. There is at least one tabular account, the paleography of which points to a late Old Babylonian date. I haven't yet succeeded in connecting it to any known text corpus, although the Eglaine archive that Gabi Spada discussed today would be at least thinkable. The rest is not very user-friendly material. One of them I have requested several times, but the conservators never issued it. Another is possibly not Old Babylonian at all. An uninscribed but sealed tag bears an Old Babylonian seal inscription, and Christopher Walker connected it to Loftus's description of such objects. So it's quite possible that it comes from his expedition. As far as I know, the B collection otherwise doesn't contain such objects. To sum up, none of the known Old Babylonian documents in the Kuyunjik collection seems to have anything to do with New Assyria and Nineveh. Still, it is possible to assign additional pieces to the already known Kutala and Ur groups, and I cannot exclude that there are still some hiding in the Kuyunjik collection. Thank you for your attention.